Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Tribe Exchange. We're excited today to have Kalah Haley on the show. Kalah is the founder and CEO of St. Rock Media, an events marketing and production company that partners with enterprise and nonprofit organizations to strategize and help execute their business objectives through virtual and hybrid event solutions. And we're going to talk about that a lot today. St. Rock Media, in the last year of COVID, pivoted tremendously and has done over 100 events virtually and hybrid for different organizations. Some of the people that they've been able to work with: USC Marshall School of Business, NFL Players Association, and JAM South Africa. Some of St. Rock's featured presenters, performances that have included Mellody Hobson, speakers like Mark Cuban, Gary Vaynerchuck, Fred Gray, Jonathan Butler, the Jonathan Butler trio, I believe, performed as well. And we're just really excited to have Kalah here on the show with us. Kalah, welcome. Good to see you.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I didn't make the list of presenters. I was on.
Yeah,
I was a little disappointed when I read the bio. I was like, man, I'm not on there,
Like maybe
Gary
next year.
Vaynerchuck and Elias Delow. No?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons we wanted to get you on is, we've worked together in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, it's 2021, so it was last year.
Yeah, it feels like 5 years ago.
I know, it feels like a long time. So much has happened. But last year we partnered with St. Rock on a international conference that we did. We had something planned, and the whole thing fell through, obviously, with COVID. And we pivoted in the summer to making it a virtual experience. And St. Rock did a great job. I think we hosted 2,300 people from 44 different countries around the world. So
something like that.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience, and we've just been impressed with what you've done over there, and wanted to have you on the show and kind of hear a little bit about your story. And obviously the Tribe Exchange, we're interested in kind of the intersection of what we do in this life and in the world, and how we operate, and how we work amongst the kingdom of heaven. That's kind of the invisible world that's happening at the same time, and where those two places intersect. And so you're a follower of Jesus, and we want to know a little bit about that too. So let's just start there. Tell us a little bit about your faith journey, how you began following Jesus, how that started for you.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. I grew up here in Denver, Colorado, the Rocky Mountains. My mom actually became a disciple while she was pregnant with me, back in the Sacramento church. And so, as I'm sure a lot of, this was really familiar back in the day, but he wasn't my dad at the time, but he saw my mom at church. He was on a business trip from Denver, saw my mom at church, and was like, that one.
Uh-huh.
And, he didn't realize he was getting a 2-for-1 deal. So, so my mom and I moved to Denver. They got married. I was around 2. And then I grew up in the church here in Denver. Absolutely love it here, still here. Growing up in the church is, it has its highs and its lows. And,
Sure.
I always had a heart and a desire to please God. Going into high school and then college. So I went to school in Atlanta, and as you can imagine, the highs and the lows of growing up in church and trying to please Jesus, but then also going to school with a bunch of rascals that aren't necessarily trying to please Jesus. And, so I guess that came with not being very popular. Right? Like, not being very liked, because I was definitely the kid that was like, can you please stop cussing around me?
Right.
So I wasn't super popular with the kids. But, I was good at sports, and that was kind of my social in, with school. And then, later on, with school, like academics and things like that. So obviously definitely had to count the cost in a lot of ways, even as a young I became a disciple when I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my mom, she was like, I was in middle school and I was like, I want to study the Bible. And she was like, you need to learn about your sinful nature first. And I was just like, okay. So, so yeah, I got to learn, I became, learned my sinful nature very, very well in high school. So, so yeah, I became a disciple at 14 and, it's just been an incredible journey since then. Yeah, so awesome. I don't know where you want us to go from there.
No, that's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So that's interesting. You go to school for biology. Did you finish your degree there at the school there? So
no,
tell me about the pivot, because somehow you went from going after a degree in biology to coming back to Denver and starting a media company. So
yeah,
tell me about that.
Oh man, the pivot is that I'm basically every disciple parent's worst nightmare, in terms of sending your kid off to go to an expensive private school and be a part of the campus ministry and then come home without a degree, and tons of student loans. So that's me.
Well, look, you're in good company, because it took me 6 years to finish a degree, and that was yeah. So I think my transcripts were I had 5 different schools on my transcripts. By the time I finished, the college, the intake counselors were like, is this all of your
It's
school?
all the coupon codes at checkout.
I had to pay so much, it's $10 a transcript or something, to get your transcripts transferred every time, but so I get it. But so you come back, no degree. What are you thinking?
Organic chemistry
happening?
Kicked my butt.
Yeah.
I took that too many times. I don't even admit how many times I took it. But anyways, so I came home, and part of the reason why I didn't finish school was literally because I was on YouTube all day long learning how to build a business. And chemistry was just not my thing that I was enjoying. And I was learning. And the thing is I was starting to understand my consumption behaviors completely changing. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up watching VHS cassettes, and then it was DVD, and then Blu-ray was there for a hot split second, and then it was Netflix, right? You get your videos streaming, delivered.
Yeah. Oh, and then YouTube. Right. Then it was just a CD, you order.
Yeah,
it was the DVD. That's right.
Exactly. But then I was a very early adopter and consumer of YouTube, and that was pretty much the only thing I watched at that time. And so I realized, I was like, oh snap, people are making TV shows and have their own thing on YouTube. And I realized very quickly, I was like, oh snap, this is what I should be doing. And so I was basically just learning how to do that all day long while I was in school.
So you went from kind of a, this is the traditional route, go to school, get a degree, science, math, business, do something, get a degree in something that's going to, play out in, the quote unquote real world. And while you're there, you kind of find this passion project of YouTube and creating content and
startups. Just
startups.
Business, yeah. And just learning, that was one thing that was pretty frustrating, was going to this liberal, this historically, HBCU, liberal arts school. And, all they want to teach you is, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become maybe an engineer.
Yeah.
And here I am, where are the business classes? How do I learn how to run a business? And that just wasn't available.
Yeah.
And so in Atlanta was really becoming a booming tech hub as well.
Right.
And I just kind of saw it, and I was like, I feel like I'm missing out on the real stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just started learning about it myself. And I did a pitch competition, that was one of the last things I did do at school, was I did a pitch competition. And I came home and I was like, I'm going to start this business. I'm going to start a podcast. And I started traveling around the country and I'm into UFC and MMA.
Are you really?
So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So
you'd be in good company here in Austin. We got Joe Rogan. We got the full package of podcast and UFC.
You do have Joe. Yeah, he moved there. So, but yeah, so I started a podcast called Girl Fight Talk, and we produced a bunch of episodes, and I interviewed UFC fighters and the president of different MMA organizations. And
that's cool.
And my friend, my producer at the time, he was like, you should start an agency. And I was just like, that's a dumb idea. Like that's, and I really just didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I was probably being prideful. And then a couple of months later, after like doing some like secret research, I was like, I think I'm going to start an agency. And that was the start of Saint Rock back in 2017.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. So Saint Rock gets started and you weren't doing, I want to talk about the pivot here into events, but that's not what you started with, right? Like what was the original business plan for Saint Rock? What was the goal?
Yeah. Digital marketing agency, everything from paid media, Facebook, not so much pay-per-click with Google, but Facebook, Instagram, and really though leaning really heavy into branding and storytelling. So content marketing,
right.
But I don't even really like calling it that. It's just really, really, really long form storytelling.
Okay. So you're, this is a really cool like arc of evolution for you. You go to school. Well, you grew up in the church. You kind of, you had said you felt kind of this, outsider, type of experience where you're the Christian kid, right? And you're trying to figure out if you want to do this thing, and then you go to school, and that outsider thing really becomes even more prominent. But that kind of steers you into finding this passion project of content creating and getting into YouTube and these things. Then you go drop school and you go and you start a podcast and you're starting to explore these different avenues, and then eventually that develops into an agency and a marketing company. And along that course, what are some of the internal conflicts that you're having? Because I don't know, I don't know you that well, right? Maybe you're just like, this is great. Like there's no issues. I don't have any questions about my direction or my course. I'm just plowing forward. But I imagine if I went through that phase in a different way, just trying to figure out what I want to do and how I'm going to go through it, probably lasted a little bit longer than you, honestly, of just the wandering times. But I know there was a lot of internal conflict, right? Of, is this the right decision? Am I wasting time? So can you kind of unpack that a little bit for me? What were some of those things that you wrestled with?
Yeah. I mean, so right after getting back from, coming back home from Atlanta from school, immediately every Sunday, I'm basically like bombarded with people asking me, hey, so how was school? And did you, congratulations on graduating. And I was even given a gift by some family members to go to South Africa as a graduation gift. And so even though I didn't graduate, the ticket was already purchased, so I still went. So then my mom's just not happy with me,
right. So
and they
external critics, not maybe like mean, but there's some critiques on your decision making.
Well, I distinctly remember one day I'm creating like a lead list, and I'm like, I'm going to go and get all these clients, and, I'm going to go and create these, these materials to go get these clients. And I remember like I worked a temp job. And so I signed up with a temp agency and worked a bunch of different temp jobs, which honestly, speaking of like the development into being a business owner, was really interesting because I actually ended up working for a lot of small but like mature business owners.
Yeah.
And they saw my hustle. They saw that I was very I worked at like a roofing company. I worked at an accounting firm. I worked at some manufacturing company for like dog toys. I worked at like all these.
You're getting training through kind of an apprenticeship experience rather than like the classical sit down in a lecture hall and read a book kind of experience.
Exactly. So for 2 years, here I am learning from these business owners, and I'm having lunch with them. And so I'm basically like learning from all these different companies and understanding, and then like pitching them at the end of my of my term. And it's like, hey, you want to help? You want some help with your marketing? And so, and some of them, they were gracious, and they were kind to me. But yeah, here I am learning all this stuff about what it means to be professional, to be in the workplace, to set a culture and create a culture. And I got to see that with like dozens of companies because I'm jumping from company to company over the course of, every other month. And so yeah, but the conflict though at home mainly was with my parents, because obviously they're very disappointed with me not finishing school. And so I'm feeling really honestly like down about that. I feel really disappointed that I've let them down. But at the same time, I just know that this is the direction I should be going in.
Right.
But there's nothing to prove that that's true at that moment.
Right.
And there's nothing that's like validating that.
You don't have like the evidence of success at that moment to say like, look, mom, this is the right thing. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And, at the time I also, man, I've done a lot. I actually was in the ministry. At the time that I was in South Africa, I was actually dating, and oh gosh, so I was dating at the time, and then I come home from South Africa, and actually stayed there like a month and a half longer than I was supposed to because I just didn't want to come home, and and I love South Africa too, but so I end up breaking up. I'm still not done with school. Every Sunday, there's this person that's asking me like if I'm done with my degree yet, and I'm just like, yeah, and I'm just like literally avoiding people at church because I'm just like, this is not a conversation. I already feel terrible about where I'm at in life right now, and I would prefer to not have to revisit this conversation every single Sunday. Like that's just not encouraging. Yeah. And so so that, and then just feeling kind of just like in this like really stuck and not exciting. Oh, so I'm in the ministry and then I get fired from the ministry because I lied about being done with school with my parents. I so desperately wanted to be done with school, and I was making progress, but I wasn't done yet. Mm-hmm. And I let my parents believe that I had finished. And but the ministry knew that I wasn't, because obviously I was like taking classes.
Right.
And one of the, I won't say who, but one person, we're at a parent-teen Devo, and my sister's in the teen ministry. And my parents are like helping in the teen ministry. And one of the ministry leaders is like, hey, I think Kayla needs some more time to like study. And my mom's like, for what?
That's it. It all came crashing down.
Yeah. So that evening, my mom's like, hey, we need you to come to our room. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, here we go.
That's gonna be fun. So there's external stuff, there's internal stuff. I imagine there is some formation that is happening for you in character and in perspective, even through the struggle, right? So there's the struggle, there's external pressures, and then there's the internal conflict. But those are all, I guess, in the biblical language, we would call that struggle, right? What in just your own faith and your, understanding of the way of Jesus, and what are some practical things that just helped you persevere? And by persevere, I mean like not just fold to the pressures, right? Like, but also to level up to the integrity that you needed to have at that moment, and like to go, hey, I'm not just going to bow down to what everybody else wants me to do. And I haven't really done things the best way, but I'm going to keep at it and get better at it. How did you navigate that? Yeah.
That was hard. I'll be honest. I think, I don't use like depression lightly. Sure. I've never been like clinically, told that I had depression, but I was just in this really pit. I was in a deep, dark pit. And I remember actually, do you know Hans Rasmussen?
I do. Yeah.
I remember at the time he was teaching a series on being in the pit. And I think it was real for him, because at the time he had actually just had a heart attack, had gone through a lot of things as well.
Yeah, and he was young, right? I mean, it wasn't like this wasn't like a later in life heart attack. This was like
I don't think he's even 50.
In school heart attack. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like I just remember that lesson, and he had this diagram, and he was like, talking about like the way down to the bottom, and then when you're at the bottom, and then like coming out of the pit. But I just remember in his lesson, he spent like a lot of time on the way down and a lot of time in the pit.
Yeah.
And it actually, in a weird way, was encouraging, because for me, I felt like I was in the pit for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, yeah, like getting out of the pit, cool. By the way, that's like what people think about your lessons. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
but like, but seriously, I was just in this like really funky place, and it just took a lot of prayer. And I do remember one day specifically, I felt like God was punishing me. I felt like His thumb was on me. I felt like, okay, God, I was negotiating with God. I was like, okay, God, I know that if I don't get this degree done, you're not going to bless my business. You're not going to bless the things that I'm trying to do. Or at least that's how I felt.
Right.
And I distinctly remember, and I should be better at journaling, but I'm not. But I remember one day specifically, I was praying, and basically this peace coming over me of, Kayla, even though you've like messed up pretty badly, you're still mine. And I'm still for you.
Yeah.
And it was that day that everything kind of just, this like huge release in this weight of having to try to like keep people happy, or it literally was, okay, wait, if God is saying to me that, and He's the only one that matters in this whole equation. Like, yes, I love my parents. Yes, I love my church family, all these different things. I even care about what I think about myself. But if in that moment, like God is telling me, I'm still for you, and I'm still going to bless you, even though like you don't deserve it or any of these things. I was like, oh, it just kind of made sense all of a sudden. I don't care what anybody thinks. And there was a freedom in that of, I don't have to keep punishing myself to, try to make myself seem like I'm always upset or hurt or disappointed. I just don't have to punish myself anymore. And I just chose not to.
Yeah, I love that. So it produced what sounds like a really healthy differentiation of who you are and who other people are and what's important and who God is. And it just sounds like, there's some benefits kind of baked in to being a follower of Jesus that really provided help, right? Like you had community in your life, people offering feedback, right? It wasn't always the best or funnest to hear. Maybe it was good, but it wasn't fun to hear, right? But it was valuable feedback, right? Like, hey, and then you had teaching and people who could even mentor you from afar, right? Maybe they weren't walking with you right up close, but they were part of your community, have going through their own struggles, mentoring you through that process. And you had prayer and meditation, and like you had a lot baked into your world, into your life by just virtue of being a Christian and being part of the Christian community where you were locally.
100%.
What do you like? So you keep at it. St. Rock gets going. There's some success, I'm assuming, at least initially, and you kind of go, okay, this thing's going to work. I think I'm going to really work. What's that decision? At some point you go like, okay, I'm just going to go all in here on this project. How did you get there?
Yeah, it was like, okay, how am I going to take care of these student loans? I'm either going to have to finish organic chemistry, no, or win the lottery, unlikely, or start a business.
Yeah.
And I just kind of went all into that, with my little temp jobs that I saved up all my money and would literally pay clients. I don't even know if I can call them a client. I'd pay clients to let me work for them.
So it started as kind of a side hustle, right? So you're not letting go of your temp jobs. You're kind of building in tandem, right?
Yep. Yeah, because you need capital to do anything, right? And so I took my little, my little $14 an hour, or I don't even know if it was that much, my little temp jobs, and would just work,
Yeah.
save, and then put together projects that I'm paying for, so that I could have a portfolio
Right.
to show, hey, we can do this for you.
Right.
And that's kind of been, I mean, to be honest, even now, I still do that. I still invest in projects,
Yeah.
to demonstrate, I know we can do it, but you don't. So let me show you.
Right. Right. So even 4 years into the business plan, there's still a space for investing into developing your portfolio, right? Which all industries do, and all leading, companies in any industry does, right? They spend money to make money, right? But I think sometimes there's this idea of like, well, once you get into business for yourself, it's all intake, right? Like you should just be taking in money, right? And that's rarely the case.
Yeah, no.
So you're still at it, and that hustle is still.
Oh, 100%. I live
DNA,
in my parents'
right?
basement.
Yeah. There you go.
So the door, we were joking about the door. That's my parents' door. It won't
There
close.
it is.
But
so you're in the business world now. You're starting to work with you've worked with some really good companies and organizations, right? And Marshall School of Business and NFL Association, and you've moved beyond just the lunch with the sole proprietor at your, that you're temping at, and now you're working with these larger organizations. What have been some of the things that you've learned that you go, wow, this is totally surprising and totally changed how I view things? And then what have been some of the harder things that you went, man, this was really hard and I didn't expect that?
Yeah, I think that some of the things I've learned is that it's just as hard to close a big deal as it is to close a small deal, and so might as well spend your time closing big deals.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Actually, I could even argue that it's maybe even easier to close bigger deals than smaller deals.
Why do you think that is? Because just from a capital standpoint, there's less risk for some of these larger organizations, that they're a little bit more willing to experiment, try new things.
Exactly, and so it's less risk for them. They know exactly what they're looking for, and they just have the cash to spend. They have the budget. And then I think for smaller companies, they're looking for the best deal. They're definitely more price conscious.
Yeah. That's working with me, right, Kayla?
I wasn't thinking of you, Elias, but now that you meant, no, I was kidding.
Yeah, that's
right. But yeah, I mean, it's going after the right market. And I think, we've worked with so many different markets because last year was so crazy that everybody needed help with production and event planning and all of those kinds of things. So we were fortunate to have worked with a very wide group of different organizations. But I think now after having had those opportunities, starting to kind of niche and narrow our focus as to who do we really want to be working with.
Yeah. So, but it took some time to even get that, who you had to get a collage of different client experiences to kind of narrow some of that down. So it's not it sounds like really it's not something that maybe you had a crystal clear vision at the beginning, but it's not something that stays that way, right? It's kind of always, it's a bit of a moving target. It's evolving over time and it's taking shape.
Yep.
And I imagine that's fun at times. Wow, we're moving into these it's becoming clearer. We're moving into these new arenas. And then probably other times it's got to be is this still the direct, I don't know, there's got to be some challenges to that as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, so specifically within our industry, we're doing events, right? And so 2020 forced every person who was putting on an event. Yeah, you had to do things virtually. And so now going into, now almost halfway through 2021, things are still virtual, but definitely moving towards going back into person. I mean, I now just received my second vaccine. shot. A lot of people are. I think we're getting towards that that critical mass moment, within the U.S. And so the question now is, okay, well, what's next? And so we're really focusing on a hybrid model for events. But within that, it's basically live events with a live streaming component, but it can get a much more, involved than that.
Right.
And so we're just constantly thinking about with the platforms that we have at our disposal, with the technologies that are becoming more available, with VR, with the metaverse, with, the blockchain and there's just so many fun things to play with that you almost have to kind of pick a lane and stay within it and build, processes and SOPs within that. And then, okay, cool. We've got that one running. Okay. What's the next thing we really want to work on and build? So I have a long list. I have notes and notes of things that I want to experiment with and get into, but we're just trying to stay focused on what's in front of us right now.
And so where does that come from for you? Because a lot of people want to go into business for themselves, and they go, man, whatever. I want to start investing, or I want to build this, brick and mortar, mom and pop kind of shop, whatever, pizza shop or bakery or something, or I want to, start a media company or something, or I want to be a TikTok, superstar. I don't know. It's all a business, right?
Sure.
But there's something that keeps you at it, keeps you wanting to keep figuring it out. And not everybody has that. Not everybody has the desire to keep pivoting so much, because it sounds like that's what you're doing, right? It's that classic Friends episode, right? Pivot. You're just pivoting. You're pivoting all the time. You're figuring out what's next and where is this leading us and how do we move here. So where does that come from? What's the difference? Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, I think I just understand. One, I think I'm constantly learning. And so I think when I first started this journey, I was committed to learning at least one new thing every single day. And so whether it's an article that I read, or as I'm just doing work and come to the realization of something, and I'm like, oh, I should be doing this, or YouTube videos, podcasts, whatever conversations I have with people. So I think I have a really big appetite for learning in general. I'm just a very curious person. I think the other thing is that I think the thing that God's put on my heart for this business, and it's almost difficult for me to separate my personal ministry life with St. Rock. That's why I called it St. Rock Media. And it's inspired. It's the spirit of Paul. I'm sorry, it's the spirit of Peter. So St. Rock, so being Peter. Right. And Peter was just constantly willing to make mistakes. He was just kind of putting himself out there. Yeah. And sure, he makes a mistake here or there, gets corrected. But then I believe it's that heart and that willingness. I always constantly am praying to God. I'm like, God, whatever you're willing to do with me, I'm willing to do it. Yeah. And so, just this heart of okay, I want to see, Jesus talks about how we'll do even greater things. And I'm just genuinely I want to see what those greater things are. Yeah. And so, for me, there's a number of things, but which is honestly my primary thing, is I just want to be debt free with school. Gotta get rid of those student loans. Yeah. I want to be in a position to be generous. I want to be in a position to, I think that the church should be, we should have an innovation department. We should have a research and development department within our church. Yeah. There are so many things I would love to see come out of this for God and for the kingdom, that I'm just willing to take the journey wherever God leads, and just focus on being excellent throughout that whole thing.
Yeah, love that. So there's a internal I want to learn. I'm curious. It's probably just something that it's part nature, part nurture. Just you were raised that way in some way. But but then it sounds like too that there's some things that have, from a motivation standpoint, the why behind what you're doing, right? That there's really some clear motivators for you. You've crystallized some things that you go, I don't know how it's all going to map out, but the things that are clear for me are why I'm pursuing this, why I'm going after that. And that kind of keeps the engine going, right? As things evolve and pivot.
Yep, exactly.
Very cool. Well, this has been a great conversation. I love, what you guys are doing, and we're definitely interested in continuing to watch your journey and to check in with you along the way with St. Rock. I know you guys have some stuff coming up. Do you want to share a little bit about that? What projects you guys have on the table right now?
Yeah, I think two things. One, we put on this conference last year called Quarantine Church Con. We hope to have maybe 5. This was in response to the world shutting down and
Right.
Easter being 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And so we put this conference on and, hope to maybe have 500 people there. We ended up having over 1,300 people from like 60 something countries. And so we see that there's a continuing need. And so we've rebranded to Accelerate. And so the event it's a virtual event. You can, I think Elias will have the link, but June 17th through the 19th is the Accelerate conference. It's free to register. So please, would love to have you all there. It's for media teams. It's for church leaders, church administrators, children's coordinators. Just hoping to provide some value as all of us are going through this journey together of kind of going back into person and what does a hybrid model of church look like? And then also we have a program called the Church Media Accelerator, CMX, which we're actually getting ready to graduate our first cohort of 7 churches at the conference, and we'll be launching our next cohort in July. So same thing, if you want to reach out, hit me up in my DMs on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever y'all do. So, but yeah, that's about it. That's what we're working on.
And then St. Rock is, what's the link there for St. Rock?
Yeah, strockmedia.com.
Okay.
SAINT.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Kalah, it's been really just a fun conversation. I appreciate your story and your journey and just filling us in on all the backdrop of it. So thanks for being with us on the show. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure.